Hi, this is Photo Fonz, and today we're going to be talking about something really exciting, and it's a very important part of photography. And it came from a question that I got on YouTube, and it's about sharp subjects with background blur. Thanks for the great question, William. And it's really something you could spend a whole day talking about, maybe even 2 or 3 days probably. But I'm going to give you my take in a short amount of time. And it's basically 3 things that determine this. We're not going to go into some of the technical things like the sensor size and so on. But basically, if you want to have your subject isolated from the background, you want to use a lens that you can, it's called a fast lens or a large aperture. And by that, I mean you're setting your lens to wide open. As an example, I have here a 70 to 200 2.8 lens. This is my favorite Nikon lens, actually. And I use this all the time for portraits and pretty much on weddings as well. And we're going to show you some images that were taken with this lens shortly. In addition, we're going to show you some images that were taken with a 85mm lens at wide open, which is 1.4, so you can see the difference. 3 things that determine the amount of background blur is aperture or f-stop. By having a fast lens, you can open up your aperture and the focal length of your lens. If you're using, say, 200 or even a 300mm lens, you're going to get some nice image blur in the background with that lens. We're going to show you different samples and point that out to you. And of course, the distance from camera to subject, and also the distance from your subject to the background. You want to be careful if you have things sticking out of people's heads. However, if you're shooting, say, wide open and you have a large focal length lens on, it's pretty much going to be all blurred out. If not, you might want to pay closer attention so you don't have things growing out of people's heads that are unattractive. And then also keep in mind that if you stand somebody against the wall, that's going to be more in focus. The background is going to be more in focus than if they were to be, say, standing in front of some shrubs that were several yards or half a mile away. So you want to keep that all in mind. On this first image here, I was testing my lens after I recalibrated it with my Nikon D7000. So I had somebody take a photo of me because he didn't want to be photographed. But anyway, I wanted to show the difference between, say, a 15mm, and that's what this is. This is a wide-angle lens on here, and you can see how pretty much everything is in focus. The background maybe is a little bit softer than the midground is, but that's pretty much how it goes with wide-angle lenses. And for many things, you may want to show everything in focus as much as possible. You want to keep things sharp. For instance, if you're showing like certain products, maybe like a road leading somewhere or some nice landscape, there might be a time that you want everything sharp. And that's a good time to use a wide angle to a normal lens. Now we switch to the 200mm, and by the way, this one is taken with the Nikon D7000. And we're zoomed all the way in now to 200mm. And it's almost the same distance, but he shot down. He just lowered the camera a little bit more. And we also opened up wide open here at 2.8. So you can see how that background, it just seems to flow. It's almost like a velvety, beautiful, soft background. And that's what's really so nice about this lens. So somebody looking for a super lens, I can't praise this lens enough. If I could only have one lens, this might be it. Especially, well, if I'm doing portraits, this will be it. Let's take a look at a few other images. This was an engagement session. And on this first one here, this was taken, of course, full length, and we were zoomed in to 120mm, and the aperture was 3.2. And then look at the difference once we zoom in a little bit more to 175mm. Aperture is the same, 3.2. Notice how the background goes a little bit more out of focus. That's nice. And then we zoom in more yet. The one on the right is zoomed at 200 millimeter and it's open at 3.2, not quite 2.8. Sometimes if I'm doing a couple, I get a little bit nervous shooting wide open just in case of one of them is going to be in focus, the other might be just a little bit out of focus. So I try to stay anywhere from, sometimes I'll go 2.8, 3.2, 3.5, I guess it is. Okay, here we're back to the 200 millimeter again. And in this particular case, I'm at 160 millimeter zoom. I'm all the way open at f2.8. Now here's a nice example of the background blur. Notice how the tree bark is pretty close to their heads and it's relatively in focus, maybe slightly soft. And a little bit back there's some branches that are just slightly out of focus, and then all the way back further there's some nice shrubs that are just completely out of focus, and it's got a really nice soft look to them. So this is a nice example of looking at things that are a certain distance away. And the one on the right was taken using a Nikkor 85mm 1.4 lens. And this was shot wide open at 1.4. And of course, 85mm. But notice how the background is just beautifully out of focus. That is a really nice lens, by the way. However, because I have my 70-200, I don't have need for too many other lenses in that range, because there isn't many lenses that are that good, in my opinion, for what I need them for, mostly portraits.